Welcome to the Darkstream. I'm VOX'S, and I am waiting for DLive to catch up with things so I can turn the chat on. There we go. We are caught up and ready to roll. So tonight is number 722, Don't Fear the Pillow. If you've been on Social Galactic, then you know that we've been having a good time coming up with some reimaginings of some classic boomer, I think it's fair to say, classic rock, classic boomer tunes. Don't Fear the Pillow, Smoke on the Pillow, I Can't Get No Suffocation. Anyhow, it's fun. I always enjoy writing the occasional pastiche. On the blog, some folks have been rather amused by my reinterpretation of Bridge Over Troubled Water. And I think if we're fortunate, we might actually be able to hear that one in the near in the near future. Actually, I would love to hear an actual a full version of Don't Fear the Pillow. That would be funny. So, but that's not really what I wanted to talk about. I think we've pretty thoroughly addressed the whole boomer thing. I mean, I'm not saying that we're done addressing it on the blog by any means, but I'm just more talking about for today. I'm going to tangent to a related subject on the musical front. There's a question from Al Dente. Vox, do your parents ever react to your boomer roasts? No, because my parents are not boomers. I mean, the thing that I find so amusing when people try to say, oh, well, you're just criticizing the boomers because you've got daddy issues. You're just criticizing the boomers because you've got problems with your parents. And the thing is that it's not even relevant, Both of my parents were born during World War II, and they don't, for the most part, they didn't, behave like boomers, raise us the way that the boomer parents raised their kids. But I'm young enough and they're close enough to being boomers that I saw a lot of boomer parenting in their social circle. And I also think that with my younger brothers, by the time they came around, I think that my parents had been somewhat affected by the boomer parenting approach, because I think that my younger brothers were much more affected by some of those types of issues, more where it comes to just the neglectful latchkey kid thing. When I was young, when I was growing up, my mother was always home, was always there when we got home. But I did have a number of friends who were latchkey kids, and I still remember vividly the first girl whose parents got divorced when we were in elementary school. It was very confusing to everyone because her name changed. You know, it was really unfortunate too because she had a reasonably normal name, and then I don't know. I don't know why she got the new name. I don't know if her mother went back to a different name or if her mother got married somebody else or what. But suddenly her last name was Gaslin. So of course, you can imagine what a bunch of fourth graders would do with suddenly you changing your name to something that sounds like gasoline, right? I wasn't a part of that, to be clear, but I do remember a lot of suddenly this girl who was one of the prettier girls and fairly outgoing suddenly became very closed off and quiet and had a weird name and was it was really kind of awful. But I was actually talking to my dad about it because he was saying that he didn't really understand what he hadn't really understood what my point was in criticizing the boomers so harshly. And then and he wasn't complaining about it. He was saying this in the context of, oh, now I get it, because one of the posts that I put up recently where I talked about the imperative in criticizing that, a fly or something or other. I talked about the imperative in criticizing that behavior because that's the only way that people will understand not to replicate it. It's important to understand that the awful boomer behavior that we're criticizing is still being recommended to younger generations now. They're still telling them the same nonsense that people my age were getting told when we were 18. And so that's why it's so important, because when people hear that message, that very materialistic, short-term preference message, it's very useful to be able to say, don't be a boomer. And I think that message is more important now than ever, because with what we're seeing from the people who are unwilling to work because they're able to collect enough unemployment plus the stimulus and whatever, UBI, basic income nonsense. There's enough people with a short-term time preference that they're entirely willing to just accept that and live like that, which is insane. But it would be a very boomer thing to do. They like nothing better than to collect checks from the government. So anyhow, but what I wanted to talk about was a tangent, because I was thinking about this in the car, and I was thinking, okay, so we know what the boomer anthems are and all that stuff. We've had a good time making fun of them, but I started thinking, okay, so what would be the representational songs of my generation, Generation X? And it's an interesting thought, because first of all, you need to be clear about what you mean by representational music. And when I refer to boomer music, I'm not talking about music that is produced by boomers. I'm talking about music that was that influenced boomers. The stuff that they consider to be their music. I mean, if you really want to if you really want to upset a boomer, you just tell them that the Beatles were not boomer music. I mean, John Lennon was born in 1940. He was technically a silent. But of course, that's ridiculous because of most music of a generation, or at least a substantial portion of that music, is being produced by people who are older than them. Because the formative music, the music that tends to stick with you, is the music that you heard in your early to middle teen years. And so Critique said REM, the Red Hot Chili Peppers, and Nirvana are definitely Gen X bands, regardless of whether those musicians are actually Gen X or not. I don't know exactly when, for example, the guys in Duran Duran were born, but there's absolutely no way, shape, or form that anyone would consider that to be boomer music, right? And it's pretty. It's pretty simple to see because it's the music that it tends to be used in the movies and stuff that are directed at the time frames of that youth. So, so for Gen X, for early Gen X, you've got all the early Euro synth pop, and then for the later Gen X, you've got all that early '90s rock sound. Third Eye Blind, and the actually probably maybe less that would probably be more millennial music now that I think about it. But if you're looking at stuff like Nirvana and that sort of thing, that's probably in there. Grunge, rave, techno, all that sort of thing. Hip hop and rap songs would be the majority for Gen Z and millennials, not for millennials and Gen Z. I mean, they mix in there. Rap first became popular among Gen X, but if you look at the stuff that Gen X rap is Public Enemy. It's not the later stuff. I still love Public Enemy, always will. But even though nothing conclusively proves the total musical dead end of rap than the fact that nobody has done anything substantially to surpass Public Enemy in 20 years making rap music. It's there's no melody, so there's very little that you can do with it. I think that's why Prince really didn't like rap very much and was so absolutely horrifically bad at it, and even when he incorporated it with the new power generation and so forth, it really wasn't incorporated effectively or well in any way. And so, but I was thinking about, because for songs that are representational, it's not just about whatever was happened to be most popular at the time. So for me, like 2 or 3 of the songs that I think most clearly reflect the Generation X generation. One would be the Jesus Jones song, Right Here, Right Now, because I think that reflected the one genuinely optimistic moment that we had. Now, one thing that a lot of people don't get about Generation X is that it's a fundamentally traumatized generation, which is a little strange because usually a traumatized generation is one that's been through a war, right? But first, you had nearly 1/3 of the generation getting aborted. Remember, this was, I mean, it's actually incredible if you look at the statistics. Abortion was very much a boomer thing. Abortion rates now in the United States are lower than they were in 1973 when they were first legalized. The younger generations are not they're not into that whole concept to the same extent. It's still way too high, still way too much, but I was there, and to go from that, to go from the experience of surviving abortion. Now that obviously didn't affect any of us as kids because we didn't know about it, except for the fact that a disturbing number of kids knew about their mothers deciding to abort their siblings. This was so this was one significant trauma. The second significant trauma is no sooner do the early Gen Xers come of age, so they've been getting this whole hedonism message from the baby boomers, all this, hey, live it up, and all that sort of thing. And then suddenly AIDS comes out, and now it's not that big a deal because of all the drugs and so forth. And now people understand that if you're not doing heroin and you're not gay, it's very unlikely to affect you. But that's not what the message was for the first 2 or 3 years. And so a lot of people in their late teens, early 20s genuinely thought that they were, practically playing Russian roulette. Talk about something that's going to mess you up. To be confusing sex and death in that way, that's not psychologically healthy for anybody, right? So you've got the childhood divorce, you've got abortion, and you've got the AIDS thing, and then on top of that, you've also got the Cold War and Ronald Reagan and the whole nuclear weapon thing, and Sting singing about how hopefully the Russians love their children too, and so forth. And so you've got a number of these factors, all of which except for the Cold War, just because we'd grown up with that. So, but you put all those things together, and at least 3 of those things are collectively worse than Vietnam. I'm not trivializing the Vietnam experience for the boomers and so forth, but you've got all those things, right? And so suddenly, um, the Cold War ends, and everyone is just, becomes incredibly optimistic for this very short period of time, you know. And so I think that I think that whiplash really did a number, really did a psychological number on Generation X, which is unfortunate, but you know, it was really. I mean, you even saw an element of that optimism, I think, in Clinton's election, because it wasn't just the Cold War. The Cold War, Desert Storm, goes well, you know, and then Clinton comes into office, and even the baby boomers are feeling the optimism. You know, there's that iconic image of the Clintons dancing around to after celebrating his election to the tune of "Don't Stop Thinking About Tomorrow" by Fleetwood Mac. I mean, that's boomer optimism, obviously, but the point is that there was this genuine optimism about the world and peace and prosperity, and all this talk about the peace dividend and so forth. And obviously, probably by 1993, 1994, that had all gone. It was all very clear that there was going to that the world was not, in fact, a better place, and so forth. But that, I mean, any list of fundamental Generation X songs would have to include Jesus Jones right here, right now, because that was a significant and defining moment for us. We don't think about it. We've all essentially forgotten it. But, I remember hearing that song for the first time in like 10 or 12 years, and it was amazing how like that, all of those old positive emotions just suddenly came rushing back, and it was a very bittersweet moment. It was very a very strange feeling. But to get back to what I was talking about, the concept of a traumatized generation, and I would select a song that wasn't necessarily particularly popular. I really liked it, but I think that particularly the sort of underlying optimism, despite the bleak lyrics, is very typical. And what I'm talking about there is "In a Big Country" by the group Big Country, and it's a really kind of intriguing song because it feels kind of positive, but and it does talk about optimism, but it's a very, very limited form of optimism. I'm not expecting to grow flowers in the desert, but I can still live and breathe and see the sun in wintertime. Okay, that's pretty low expectations. That's not, we're going to change the world. That's like, okay, it may be cold outside, but I'm still alive and I can still see the sun. King Billy says it's Scottish optimism. Yeah, seeing the sun in Scotland, you got to be an optimist, right? Uh, we we went to Ireland years ago, and it was funny because It was beautiful the first day we arrived, and then it just rained every day for a week. But yeah, I love that that bagpipe effect on the. I didn't know what it was, but I just thought it was a bagpipe. But it was a great sound. But the thing is that if you think about it, you've got a song that is, feels like it's expressing this optimistic message. And what is that optimistic message? Just stay alive. Stay alive. And I think that that's a very apt expression of a traumatized generation that had a third of its ranks triply decimated by its own mothers, you know. And so I think that, so that would be my second song, is In a Big Country. And for a third song, now this one I don't know if it's quite if it's quite representational of the generation, or if it's simply because I grew up going, in Minnesota and went to school in Minneapolis. But, for me, Prince is, my formative music. I mean, the way that the baby boomers talk about the Beatles, the way that they it's just fundamentally intrinsic to their milieu. That's what Prince was like for me. I never even bothered to buy a single Prince CD, album, tape. I didn't have to. Like, it was essentially the soundtrack of living in that place at that particular time. And so I was thinking about it, and of all the various songs, it would probably be it'd probably have to be Purple Rain, just because of the melancholy theme that is not particularly self-centered. If you look at the overall themes, it's essentially apologetic, and so that's why I think that it's a contender. I'm less certain about that. Like I said, it could just be because of where I grew up and that sort of thing. But it is interesting though how pretty much everybody that grew up in that, in or near that place at that time, my wife didn't grow up there specifically, but she did move to Minneapolis later, and she's just as heavily influenced from that sort of thing. I mean, there's a lot of songs that are personal influences that you identify with or relate to in some way that you wouldn't think that would you wouldn't even think about suggesting for the whole generation. Bunny Galore says, I'm from the Boston area and it was all Aerosmith all the time, with Jay Giles a close second. Yeah, I mean, one of my personal songs, one of the songs that I consider to be fundamental is definitely Centerfold. For reasons that you can probably figure out. But Did you ever see Prince around? Yeah, um, I actually met him several times. You know, bumped into him several times. Um, because I was involved in the music scene and stuff. There were various points of contact. I mean, I played at First Avenue. Um, the if you've ever seen Purple Rain, you know the stage. I've played on that stage. I played at Glam Slam, which is the club that he actually owned, that he started and owned. Um, and we had regular passes to the VIP sections at First Avenue. Um, if you ever see the like Morris Day in the Time, um, or some of the Prince videos where they show like an upstairs thing in the Morris Day video, I think Jungle Love, there's these like dancers who look like the Public Enemy S1Ws that are up there. That's actually the First Avenue VIP section. Um, and But I mean, the crazy thing, and the thing that I'm frankly appalled by, is that I never bothered to go to a Prince concert. You know, it never occurred to me to necessarily want to go, you know, to a show, because I was just so, inundated and familiar with it. I mean, it's like, you know, I mean, it's not the kind of thing that you would necessarily turn down, but it wasn't something that you'd necessarily go out of your way for either. And in retrospect, that just strikes me as totally idiotic, you know. But but yeah, he was always nice, polite. People were always careful not to bother him. He would he wanted to, or when he'd want to talk to you, his bodyguard would come over and say, "Prince would like to speak with you now." And so then you would go over and he would speak with you. Um, but you know, Paul, the lead singer of my band, he actually recorded a song with Bobby Z from the Revolution. Um, and we were also friends with the guy who was the engineer on the Diamond and Pearl CD. And then of course some of the production people had worked on various things at Paisley Park. And the second Psychosonic album was actually recorded at Paisley Park. So, there was a fair amount of crossover, I guess you'd say, or just tangential relations and so forth. Um, but and then I think for a fourth song, some people have suggested Red Hot Chili Peppers' "Give It Away." I don't think so. I don't agree with that. Um, I would have to say the Nirvana Nevermind. I mean, how can you leave out grunge? How can you leave out that whole Seattle sound? The sub pop, uh, the sub pop movement, as it were. Um, and I think that Nevermind, or not Nevermind's the album, but Smells Like Teen Spirit, I think tends to capture that whole apathy that Generation X has been prone to. You it's kind of funny because Douglas Copeland is credited as naming Generation X, which is kind of silly because Generation X is actually, of course, the name of Billy Idol's original band, which, by the way, um, Dancing with Myself is actually a Generation X song, not a Billy Idol song. Um, but the um, the fact that the whole thing, first of all, the guitar riff is a twist on a Boston song. It's it's kind of funny that Vanilla Ice gets such grief for having taken a David Bowie bass line and just tweaking the end of it, and nobody minds that. And here, Nirvana takes a Boston riff and changes the last note, and nobody seems to mind that. It's kind of funny. I don't remember who it was that said it, but there's a band in the from Minneapolis called the Replacements, and somebody said when the Nevermind came out, they said, "Wow, that's a great little Replacements record." I didn't necessarily see that as much, but and I was not a fan of the Replacements, although that was actually the first concert I ever attended. But the fact that you've got, it's both a sardonic, musically it's a twist on a Boomer song, and the fact that it builds up to the big climax of, well, whatever, never mind. That epitomizes the apathy that is the generational sin of Generation X. And what I was going to get to is the Douglas Copeland book called Generation X. I actually think is less representational than a book by the same author called Microserfs. Microserfs is a fantastic book. I'd highly recommend it. I really enjoyed it, and I thought that it really, I think that's his best work. But just the attitudes there is very, I think, informative and representational. So, but I'll put up a post on the blog soon and see if I can see if anything else strikes me in particular. I mean, I was thinking about if there's any like artists that I felt were missing somehow, like how could you possibly not mention Bob Dylan for the Boomers, right? So who is like that for Generation X? But there's, I mean, who were the big bands? Duran Duran, U2, Madonna. I don't necessarily see any of those as being fundamentally significant. New Kids on the Block. They are so awful. I mean, but you can't have stuff that so many people hated that much. By the way, somebody mentioned Eyes Without a Face being way ahead of its time. I love Eyes Without a Face. I've always loved Eyes Without a Face. I thought that was easily the best Billy Idol song. The other Billy Idol song that I thought was underrated, that he never got much credit for, is Do Not Stand in the Shadows. I always like that song too. Creep? No, I don't think Creep is representational of a male behavioral pattern. I mean, Creep is the definitive Gamma song. I don't think it's they were never big enough among enough Gen X to qualify. Somebody suggests Michael Jackson, but what? I mean, there were really only two massive songs. Billie Jean was not relevant. We were too young for that. Thriller, Beat It? I don't think so. Actually, I don't think Depeche Mode is big enough either. But a song that would fit the criteria would probably be Blasphemous Rumors. And that's a great song, and it encapsulates the Generation X attitude, the expectation that the other shoe is going to drop. You know, the whole bit about how, this girl, becomes religious, finds new life, and then gets hit by a car. And the whole, and it's kind of interesting because I think that it, in some ways, might have helped me better understand the Christian faith, because even though Depeche Mode is blaming the wrong entity, I think that that chorus, that very, very dark chorus, I don't want to start any blasphemous rumors, but I think that God's got a sick sense of humor, and when I die, I expect to find him laughing. I mean, that's definitely a Generation X concept. And I think that helped me understand that the God of this world is, a sociopath with a sick sense of humor. No, but there's like lesser bands. I don't think. Suicidal Tendencies is way too trivial to even be a possible candidate. Nine Inch Nails, Head Like a Hole, is certainly a possibility. If you think about the whole, bow down before the one you serve, and the concept, and this is where Generation X fundamentally parts from the baby boomers. Think about it. Bow down before the one you serve. You're going to get what you deserve. That's so fundamentally different than any concept that can be reasonably described as boomer. They're still shrieking because they're getting a very, very small portion of the criticism that they obviously deserve. No, but it has to, the point is not songs that you can come up with. They have to be big fundamental songs that were successful enough and meet that. So, for example, Blind Melon thematically, yeah, absolutely, but probably not necessarily significant enough. Def Leppard, I don't think so. They're just too shallow. It's frankly embarrassing to. I liked actually the part of High and Dry, and then the second Def Leppard album. I like the before the drummer lost an arm. It's pretty much when I like them. But no, again, what song could possibly even be relevant to the kind of topic we're dealing with? It's embarrassing to listen to the lead singer of Def Leppard talk about what their songs mean, because he's trying to explain these metaphors that are just wildly obvious. REM End of the World as We Know It gets referenced a lot. Yeah, it's possible, but But maybe if it fit, see, I think that fits the optimism angle. If you look at when that song came out, and the end of the world as we know it, and I feel fine. I think the Jesus Jones one is much more is much more relevant. Soundgarden, I like Soundgarden a lot, but no, I don't think. Of course, I cannot believe I forgot possibly the song that I should have put first, which of course is Rage Against the Machine, Killing in the Name of. I mean, that's, but that might just be that's probably just appropriate for a mentality or something more than anything else. But I mean, that was, when I think about an anthem, that's what I look at. That's what I think about. I'm going to get rid of this guy here. It's funny. If people have a problem with the fact that I don't speak very quickly, you can always just wait. Watch it later and speed it up, you know what I mean? Anthem, no. They're Pixies, no. I mean, again, it's not about good bands or bands you like or something. It's about something that most of the generation is familiar with, relates to, and would feel that it tends to express something significant. That's why we're talking about representational music. So that's my thoughts. Obviously, there's no right answer, just a lot of wrong ones. And so I think that Kid Rock is probably too late, in my opinion. So, yeah, Filter, Hey Man, Nice Shot. that might. I mean, there's certain songs that you could credibly suggest. That would be one. Tub Thumping is definitely that's on my list of songs that are kind of on my Let's Get Fired Up selection. Beck Loser, that's also a reasonable choice. I totally agree with Mailer Damon. 311 should have been much bigger. They were great. I think I have 2 or 3 of their songs on my car USB stick, in fact. Oh, hey, we got another Gamma here. How long before Bertaria goes Ruby Ridge mode? I have nothing whatsoever. I mean, first of all, I'm all for Bertaria. I don't know why anybody would think there's anything wrong or questionable with it. But also, I have literally nothing to do with it. So, anyhow, it's fun to talk about music like this. We'll have to do it more often, but I'm going to call it an end tonight. So if you have any more thoughts, stop by the blog, and when we discuss it on the blog, we'll see what people have to say. In the meantime, I'm VOX'S, and this is the Darkstream.